This is episode 2 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome.
Okay, let's take a look at the news. So, Electrek is reporting that Norway has become a tourist destination of sorts for fuel companies looking to see what the future of gas stations is going to look like.
Right.
So it says here that Canada's Couche-Tard, who runs all kinds of convenience stores, and they own the Circle K stations here in Canada. They've been visiting Norway to see what the future looks like.
That's interesting, isn't it? And let me just say this as an aside. I don't know what your story is going to be till you say it. This is exciting for me. And you don't know what my story is going to be.
It's not that exciting.
Each week we pick a story and we talk about it. So I thought that was an important story too. And let me just say did I not pick it. But it's important because it shows what the future is in Norway, people. It's in Norway. We can go look at it. Get on a plane and go look at the future.
No, and especially relevant to Canada since, Norway's a northern country, so they have a similar climate to ours. They have these terribly cold winters. So, Norway is the future, and they're driving electric cars.
But no Bjorn, he left.
He left Norway?
For Taiwan.
Yeah.
That's sad. It ruins Norway's brand with me. I'll just say that right now. All right, my story is about Tesla's push for solar on residential. Now, normally I don't really talk about solar on residential as being a big needle changer, pusher for the fight against climate or a fight for climate, and our progress towards 2030, which is what this show is all about. By the way, we're stopping in 2030. So get your fill now, people. We're stopping in 2030 because the world will be saved by then.
Yeah.
Normally I say, well, grid solar where you have massive fields, that's really going to make the difference. But this could spread like the coronavirus. Because I'm sorry to bring up the coronavirus, but it could spread like a virus. And the reason why is because they are really pushing and getting on top of this quickly. They have the price point that makes it cheap, and they're only charging $50 a month. So you could, and they're guaranteeing that you will save money. So it's a no-brainer. Like, I couldn't do solar for the longest time because I couldn't afford it. A lot of people would love to do solar. They can't afford it. But if you pay $50 a month, even if you're poor, even if you have 50 rental houses and poor people are occupying them who couldn't possibly do this on their own, but if they were given the chance, they would actually save a couple of bucks and have solar. So that could spread. And there's a big push with that because it's going to change the grid, because it's not just solar panels. We're talking battery storage as an option as well at some point, and also a control for how the grid gets controlled, which saves money and changes the grid and improves the grid. And Tesla is working on that. And that's another reason why you're going to be rich, I think, is because as a stockholder, you're going to have a mansion on a hill someday because this is going to be huge. They're going to be their own utility company. And they have, Elon has said that this could be bigger than their automotive business someday. Yeah, well,
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's ways to work the math where it's not only, carbon neutral or carbon free, but is also cheaper. And I think that that's really the case with all of Tesla's businesses, with the cars as well, that there's the potential for them to be cheaper than gas cars. So, once they're cheaper, once putting up solar is cheaper, it's all a no-brainer.
They will remove it. If you don't want it, if you change your mind, they'll actually come and take it down, which is amazing. And I don't think virtually anyone will do that. I don't know why they would do that. Unless it reflects and kills their neighbor by shining light through their window or reflect. I don't know. I can't think of any reason, any logical reason. But that's my story of the week.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. And kudos to you as well.
So it's minus 30 Celsius again. We were talking about this last week. We're still in another cold snap.
That's not the wind chill. That's the temperature.
That's the temperature.
Don't even ask about the wind chill.
The wind chill. And so you drove here again today?
Yes.
In your Nissan LEAF?
My LEAF hasn't been used because it's a week off school here. And my wife has had some time off, but she did make a run last night. And I had given a presentation, as we talked about last week, and I'd said that my battery heater had never actually come on because through the process of charging the battery and draining it, and using it, it heats up just because, if you charge a battery, like a AA battery, it'll get warm, right? Or your cell phone or whatever. And batteries in cars are huge and self-contained and insulated. And but yeah, I thought my battery heater never came on. I was wrong. It has come on twice that I know of this year, and I think once last year. Now that I don't think about it, there's actually an indicator on the dash. The middle of the three lights will come on saying that the battery heater's on, but I rarely wander out if it's minus 40 anyway to see it, so I think I just missed it. Anyway, there's a quirk in the Nissan LEAF, and remember that I have a 2013 Nissan LEAF S, which I bought dirt cheap because it has no frills, no quick charge, nothing. And what happens when I had it set to charge to 80%, when I got into the car this morning, it was at 100%. I think what happens with the battery heater as a 3.3 kilowatt charger is that it will charge as it heats. And I don't know why it does that, if it has to do that, if it's a quirk in the system, because it needs to just turn on in order to drain from the grid and not from the battery itself. So it charged 100%. And here's the thing. This has happened twice now. Normally, I didn't preheat the car because didn't have a regular schedule this week, taking the kids to school. So I didn't preheat the car. I turned it on, and so I had to run the heater for a while as I was scraping. And usually it's warm by the time I'm done scraping. I get back in and it's warm, which is not something that happens in a combustion car. So I scraped the windows. You're very lucky if you don't know what that is, but ice forms on a window when you park in the driveway in very cold weather and a clear night, and you scrape it off. So I did that and got in and drove here, and it wouldn't go down. It was at 100% still for a long time. And finally, by the time I got to 4th Avenue, which is quite a ways, I would expect it to be down 10, 12% in weather like this, based on the fact also I had it on full blast heat. I didn't have it on eco mode. I said, send all your energy to the heater. I don't care. So it usually, and the battery's cold, the tires are cold, and everything's cold. I'm stiff, and the car's stiff, and it didn't go down, but it finally went down. So that tells me that it kept charging, and went into some sort of reserve area of the battery, because lithium-ion batteries work between 20 and 80% at best. That's their optimal range of temp. You can charge it to 100, but you're not supposed to leave it at 100, which is an interesting note if you are leaving your car in very cold weather. But there seemed to be like a 10% buffer there that I as much as research as I've done on the Nissan LEAF when I bought it, and it was a 2-month full-time job to do that. And it is with a lot of cars. If you're going to buy a car that you don't know about, it can be. So I didn't know that. And I'm sure maybe it's out there, and some people who really know about the car know that. I know there's been other cars like the Chevy Volt with a V that has been praised because it has a lot of headroom that it doesn't use so that the battery doesn't degrade. Because I know in the new Nissan LEAFs, the latest generation of them, they don't even give you an option to charge to 80%. They just charge 100%. And I think the reason they get away with that is because of that buffer. Plus, I've seen a lot of people on the forums with Nissan LEAFs say they charge 100% every day, and they've got the best batteries out there. They've so many thousands and thousands of kilometers or miles, and then they still have full bars on the batteries, and it hasn't degraded that much, and they're charging to 100%. And I people will scream at them, you're not supposed to do that. But that's my story of driving here in minus 30.
Yeah, so all the manufacturers, they all have ways of managing the health of the batteries and making them last a long time. And everybody, it appears, has extra headroom because, it's going up to 100% and going down to 0 is what is going to destroy your battery the most.
Yes.
So if the car company can build in that headroom so you never even get to truly 100%, like it might say 100% on your dash.
But it's not 100%.
But it's actually not,
And I do have the little doohickey that hooks up to your smartphone that you can look at the state of health, but I've stopped doing that because it's just scary.
So here's what happened to me last week when it was minus 30. After we finished recording, I decided to go for lunch. And, I was just going, it was a quick 5-minute drive, but so I still only have gasoline cars, and, they start pretty well at minus 30, but my Hyundai, it's got a quirk where if you don't warm it up fully, then it won't start the second time.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so it was only a 5-minute drive to where I wanted to go for lunch. But I made it a 15-minute drive so that the car would warm up fully so I could take it on the highway. Like, it's ridiculous.
Because the worst thing about being stranded at home was being stranded somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what would have happened, because the car would not have been fully warm. And when I got out, and then you sit for another 10 minutes and eventually it starts. But it's a weird quirk. We had the same thing with a Nissan that we owned. The Nissan people said it was a sensor issue. Like the car gets confused when it's that cold or something. The sensors, so it wasn't turning over at all. It's like you press the start button and nothing happens.
Can I just say that we are in a bomb shelter right now? And I still hear the helicopters that I hear over my house.
What? Really?
I just heard a helicopter.
Okay.
Well, if you were a war veteran of any sort and had PTSD, and you have to hear these damn helicopters, there's a labor dispute at the refinery, which is on the other end of town by my house, and they're always flying over, and I'm sick of it. It's like, we can't afford to pay our employees, but we can afford to bust them in on helicopters every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the oil industry. I can't wait till it goes out of business. Not the whole oil industry, just the damn refinery that's down by me. It stinks, eh?
Yeah, you live by the refinery, and it would be much better if that was not.
And then there's pipelines that literally go through my backyard practically.
Yeah.
If they were to blow up, I would be one singed James, I think, at best. So
yeah, I have this problem where, and we live in kind of a small city, so you often have these short journeys that are only like 5 minutes in your car, and your gasoline car doesn't warm up. And like I would have to run it for half an hour before I went anywhere, to idle it for half an hour to warm it up. And, I don't want to do that.
Our other car is a Prius, a normal Prius, not a plug-in Prius. And this is a sin in the Prius world. And I think a lot of the people on forums don't know what -30 or -40 is in Celsius or Fahrenheit when you get so that they think you shouldn't be warming up. You should get in and go. You're not supposed to warm up your car. And you don't need to. Mm-hmm. But I start my wife's car in the morning as I drive my kids to school. And when I come back, she's leaving to take the kids. And what you can do is you can set the heater to a low temperature, like 16 degrees Celsius or something like that. And so it'll turn off. The engine only runs and it charges the battery a bit and warms up to operating temperature, and then it turns off. Mm-hmm. So it's not running constantly. So that's kind of a nice thing. However, if I said that on a Prius chat forum, I would be ridiculed and people would send bombs to my house. So please don't do that. And
here's the thing, like I work, like it's about a 20-minute walk to where I work. And I walk every day, including when it's -40. And part of the reason is this exact problem. It's like a 5-minute drive. Yeah. The car would never warm up. Yeah. And then you're at work for a while and the car's stone cold when you get out. So I've determined that it's just actually way more comfortable to put on a warm parka and walk to work than it is to, try and warm up a stone cold car that never really warms up anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think another interesting story, because we were talking about this as you were deciding to buy a Model 3, one of the advantages is that they retain their value quite well. And there was a story this week about that. In fact, it's incredible that it loses something like $2,500, which is a small fraction of the retail price. This is American money, a year later. And that's twice as good as the closest competition. Twice as good. Yeah, it's at the top of the list for retaining value after a year. So most people are hesitant to buy electric cars. And frankly, I was too. Like as much as I knew and had been following it my whole life, it's still a difficult thing to do because it's new technology. And you worry about these things. But I think that's going to help. Yeah, and that was part of the calculation when I decided to put down the deposit on the car, which I don't have yet, but resale value, like most gasoline cars are going to have terrible resale value just because they do anyway, like they lose a lot of value anyway, but particularly in a world where we're transitioning to electric cars, it's going to be harder to get rid of one in a few years. Well, I said on the Twitter that you lose $2,500 just by driving off the lot. Yeah, that's been common knowledge for years. And that's like a standard car. That's probably half that price. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But so to think that you could drive a whole year and be in the same situation for a car that's twice as expensive as your average, well, maybe not twice as expensive, but something like that.
And I will say it's probably always a dumb idea to spend money on cars. Like,
Yes.
It's money that always goes down the drain, and we should all be walking and riding bicycles and public transport. But if you are going to spend money on the car, I did the math. I looked at the options, and I think, going electric is the better way to spend money at this moment.
If you're going to spend money. And yeah, I think that there's a point, because cars last 20 years, and I think Elon, Ed was talking about this in an interview recently, is that they will lose money, that it's going to be a stranded asset at some point. Because if you're expecting that car to last 20 or 25 years, which they do now, which is a credit to the improvements they've made in the bodywork and in the engine, you can't expect that anyone's going to care about a combustion car in 2042.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like driving a sewing machine to work. I mean, no one's going to want that thing, and you're not going to be able to pawn it off on anybody, not even a high school student. I do think that gas will be cheap because starting sometime later in this decade, there's going to be pressure on gas prices. The growth is going to slow, and we're talking people are talking $20 a barrel, $25 a barrel, $15 a barrel. Possible. It's hard to say how that's going to pan out, but I think it's fairly certain that once the S curve starts going on electrified transportation, that gas will be cheap. But still, you'll still have to repair the thing. There will be less people to repair it. That's my thought.
Yeah, and of course, this is the problem that the traditional automakers are having, is that so much of their business model is based upon service, and it's based upon how things have been done for the last 100 years. So the cars themselves are almost a loss leader. Like, they don't, you don't make that much money selling a combustion car. But if it's on the road for 15 years, that's 15 years worth of repairs and oil changes and everything. And that's kind of where you make up your money. So the traditional automakers are going to have a very difficult time transitioning and somehow doing without that revenue, as, electric cars need less maintenance. And
that's
repairs.
Another story that's in the news lately is how far ahead that Tesla actually is. And I don't want Tesla to be that far ahead.
Yeah.
I want everybody else to be making electric cars, and Elon does too. That's his whole bloody plan.
Yeah.
The Tesla fanboys like yourself, which you've admitted in the last show that you're a fanboy, only want Tesla to succeed. I don't, and neither does Elon Musk. He wants everyone to succeed.
Yeah.
And they're way, way behind. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Ford F-150 does. Yes, it's got lots of torque and towing power because of the nature of the powertrain, but how efficient is it? And what's the battery technology and all that? 6 years ahead, a Japanese Teradyne did, and people said, we can't even touch this. This is going to be 6 years. And 6 years will kill them.
Yeah.
That'll kill them.
No, Tesla was able to start from scratch without any of the legacy issues. So, and did everything vertically integrated. So they've got their own computer, their own parts and everything. It's just a whole different beast that everyone else is really going to struggle to replicate.
You know that they say that auto sales are down now, and they're struggling for various reasons, but one of them is because younger people are not driving. They said that 1 in 10 people who trade in their car don't get another car. Mm-hmm. 1 in 10. And that's only going to rise. And that's largely due to just a change in culture. And
millennials not having all that much money.
Yeah, and wanting to save up for a house, which is going to, God help them. But yeah, and just Ubers, being able to use your app to get around on a phone, and just the simplicity and economics of that,
It's the other change that's coming. I'm not sure when, but it's not just electrification, but it's, self-driving and automation. And
self-driving
and
is the big question mark. Mm-hmm. When it comes, someone's going to get rich. It's probably Tesla. And you, by default. I'll have to replace you. Yeah. You're going to be too wealthy.
I'm going to be too wealthy.
Your assistant will show up and do the show for you. One of your assistants, maybe your butler. That's because when that happens, and it could happen in a few years. I mean, a lot of people, I think it's maybe delayed a bit based on some recent things, but there are people who say it's never going to happen, and there are Waymo vehicles driving people for money without drivers in them as we speak in some small geo-fenced places, I noticed.
But yeah, we're definitely moving away from a car ownership culture, which, it seems unlikely where we live because it is a very car city where we live.
Yeah.
You need a car, but easier to imagine in bigger centers for sure.
And people always say to me, but I love driving. But that's not the issue. The issue is that you could save $6,000 a year and just have a car within 30 seconds show up at your house that's warm and minus 30 and take you somewhere safely while you do work. Well, I could prepare for this podcast for once on the way here. Maybe have a martini. I don't know. I probably should. That's my thought.
Because if you'd had a martini, you'd be better prepared.
That's how when I say prepare, I mean have a martini. And I don't even know what a martini is. Probably a glass of wine or something.
Yeah, well, we're both fans of Tony Seba, is he an economist? Is that what he is?
Yeah, I think he's a certain kind of economist. And
a prognosticator?
Well, he researches why incumbent companies and don't see change coming.
Yeah.
Like Nokia, Kodak, all that. They never see it coming. It's always those people who never see it, never accept it. And I think that's largely the case with your Toyotas and other people today. Yeah,
and so he's very much predicting the electric car future, but also, like the self-driving automation thing. And really, he's predicting the end of car ownership.
Oh, yes. Soon.
Yeah.
Like, transportation as a service, TAS. Memorize that, folks. It's going to be coming up a lot in the next decade. Basically, because it's a lot cheaper to use transportation as a service, and you if you're a corporation with a fleet of vehicles, it's going to be cheaper to have electric vehicles, and then you can even supply your own power. You can set up your own solar grid and power those vehicles that way, and be your own utility and be in complete control. And that's probably what's going to happen because whoever does the cheapest will win.
Yeah, you
won't be able to compete. And it's something like 10 cents a mile, not as little as 10 cents a mile. Elon said 18 cents a mile. But in terms of here, you could put that on a coupon. If you are A&W, you could say, I will take you to A&W. Instead of $1 off, you say, I will drive you to A&W for free. And it'll cost them 40 cents instead of $1.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can have a burger for 50 cents off and you'll be warm and or, maybe the car brings it to you.
And it's the other issue in terms of resale value on cars. And that's one of the reasons that the Tesla Model 3 has such good resale value is that it has all the hardware for full self-driving. So again, when you have an option for something that is forward-looking versus something that is backward-looking, of course, it's going to hold its value.
Did you consider that at all, full self-driving option?
Yeah, so you have to pay for it. It's no, I haven't. If you pay for it up front, it's like 9,000 Canadian dollars right now, I think. No, I'm not going to do it because it's until they work out the liability, I don't think it's really viable. Like I think, software wise, I think they're going to be ready any day now, like within the next year or so.
Really,
I think they'll be ready software wise, but they haven't worked out the liability. So if I was to pay for that self-driving, 6 months from now, and I can push a button and the car can drive itself. If I run over somebody and kill somebody, the liability is still on me. So I think until the liability is on someone else, it doesn't really make sense to pay for that self-driving thing unless you're rich because they've promised that the price will be higher later.
Because you can make money off of it.
Yeah, because then you can
drive yourself to your job and then have it go work for you.
And then your car can go work for you as a robotaxi. But yeah, until the liability thing is worked out, I think it doesn't really make sense because you could get yourself into a terrible position where, you're letting the car drive itself and, there's an accident or something. But since the liability is still on the human being, I'd like to stay away from that.
All right. Well, I'd like to do some housekeeping. I'd like to mention that we are on Apple Podcasts now.
Okay, great. We
are on Google Play Music, but as far as I know, we're not on, I didn't check today, but we're not on Google Podcasts yet.
What?
Yeah, it takes a while. They have to crawl the web and find you. You can't submit yourself.
Really?
Yes. Well, it's Google.
Really?
Yes.
That's wild.
Apple took 2 days this time, took 5 days with my other podcast, and Google took about 8 days, I think. So we'll see.
I mean, no one's listening anyway. So
no, they're not. And if you are and you're angry at Brian's comments about not the full self-driving and liability, write us, and I don't know how. How do you write us?
Yeah, well, you have a Google. Didn't you set up a Google address for this?
I think I did. It's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com.
Okay.
And our Twitter handle is CLN Energy Show.
On Twitter?
On Twitter.
And you are J.E. Whittingham on Twitter?
J.E. Whittingham, yes, as well.
I'm Brian Stockton on Twitter. I don't really tweet, though. Am I going to have to start tweeting now?
It's good to promote, so we can maybe get our listeners up to 6-7 people.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's too many.
That might be too many.
Yeah, I feel under a lot of pressure if we had 7 people.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Here's the thing. Other thing I was going to talk about. So yeah, I'm waiting patiently for a Tesla Model 3 that I've put a deposit on.
Okay.
Do you know what is the other American car that I've owned? I've owned a handful of cars in my life.
But only one other American.
Yeah, so the Tesla will be my first American car in a very long time. What is the other American car?
Datsun. Some sort of Datsun.
No, that's a Japanese car.
Right. Of course it is. I want to say Chrysler something. Feel like a Chrysler.
No.
Is it weird?
It's a bit weird. I put it in a film that I made back in 1990.
Okay. No.
I owned a 1972 AMC Gremlin.
You're kidding.
No, I paid $75 for it.
My dad bought one for me.
A Gremlin?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, no. What's the other one?
Pacer.
It was a Pacer.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what? It broke down after a month. And that was freaking that. And it was a horrible car.
I think the Pacer was a lot worse for some reason. The Gremlin was actually pretty good mechanically. Like it was
right?
Yeah, it was a very simple car, fairly reliable. But I only paid $75 for it. But I never had any major issues with it. I didn't drive it that much.
Mm-hmm.
But when I grew up in the 1970s, American cars were kind of on the way down, and Japanese cars were kind of the thing. So I've only owned one other American car, and it was kind of ironically.
I'm amazed. I mean, it might have been true at the time, but I still talk to old people in my old neighborhood who think that, oh, you own a Japanese car.
It's still a weird thing for some people, yeah.
Oh, and my brother-in-law was like freaked out. He was like, he's Albertan, so it's hard to say. But there are people around here who think it's a crazy idea to own a foreign car, and they still think that it takes forever to get parts.
Yeah,
even though my Leaf was made in Tennessee, and half the parts were made in America, and No, it's true, and people still have, so like I've got a Hyundai and a Kia, and a lot of people still have negative impressions of those. And yeah, the early days they were not that great, but the reliability is really good. They've shot up now.
Yeah. It's
and at the top of the list.
Really good value for money, basically. So,
right.
I've owned Japanese cars and Korean cars, basically, and just the one 1972 AMC Gremlin.
Well, electric cars will solve all of that because they are very reliable and very simple, and we just have to keep telling people. I'm exhausted from doing it, but people just make constant assumptions about electric cars, like that, especially around here, where it's fine if you're in Florida, but it's not going to work in the winter here. But the fact is, of course, they work better in the winter.
Yeah, no, it's still an unusual thing where we are.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm James Whittingham. We'll see you again next week, I presume.
Next week, let's do it again.
Bye for now.
Bye.